the first thing that I've seen pop up in the public Slack was bundle formats as part of the core specification. I'm not exactly sure that 104 specifically falls under core. Someone asking, and then the other thing was whether bundle formats being part of the core specification would have any impact over the spec and over the registry and security specs.
So yes, the core spec is everything in the 100 category.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, that's something to be concerned with.
Yeah, and then the second part of the question was whether the thick bundle format changing would have any impact over security and registry. And first of all, do people have strong opinions here?
Sorry, how is it changing exactly? Maybe I missed something.
No, it's not. It was just people trying to make sure that one part of the spec changing does not affect other parts without us realizing.
I see. The way I see it, I don't think so. I mean, you can change the bundle format however you'd like, and security works on top of it. You just add a new hash for the new bundle format, and that's it, right?
I think the main concern people had was whether the current state of the security and registry spec conform with the current bundle formats. And the question is yes. Whenever we finalize the thin and thick bundle formats, we try to make sure that we can accommodate both specifications. And we had working versions for both of them before going with 1.0 final for bundle formats.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And our implementations will be able to test that.
Yeah, and then just for the record, currently CNAB to OCI supports thin bundles, and probably most OCI registries are going to be concerned with thin bundles, even if they end up pushing all artifacts. But the representation of the bundle itself is going to be bundled JSON. And then specifically for the security specification, you can push the content digest of the bundle regardless of its format. It's just you're gonna be pushing the content digest of the thick bundle rather than a thin bundle. And then if that is what you're gonna push, then whatever implementation you're using should or should not pull from OCI, depending on whether it's a thin or a thick bundle. And that's how Sign is currently working. So we have working versions for thin and thick bundle pushing to content digest.
Should we open an issue to try to clarify this in the or at least make a note of it in the PR somewhere?
I think the most we can do is follow up with the Slack conversation there and just make sure that people are aware of that.
Okay.
Would that work? I don't think it was an actual issue opened on the spec. It was just someone asking, and we just wanted to make sure we address it at some point.
Right.
I'm just thinking this does kind of bring up a dependency issue where if we change drastically like the bundle.json format and we need to update the registry part, I know we need to write that still, but we do have a dependency now because the old text will no longer be valid for an updated core version of the spec. So almost like the other versions, the other parts of the spec need to be tied to a specific version of the core, and they will evolve hopefully at the same time as the core once we have everything in place, but maybe sometimes they'll lag a bit.
So do you think we could have a resemblance of a process in place whenever we update some part of the spec? Is that what you had in mind?
It might be too early to say how we handle it. My hope would be we could write generic enough text in the other sections that it's just, if you just say store it as canonical JSON and it's stored in this way, it doesn't matter what's in the JSON, right? So so that's like first prize is you write it generically enough that it just works. But I'm sure we're going to run into cases where things will change. Well, maybe not, and we'll need to make a bigger change. Maybe it's something to hit when we get there, though.
So are you asking, Radu, if we could formalize a process that just said, I, Matt Butcher of Sound Mind and I can't really say that second part, have reviewed the spec to verify that it's in compliance with the core spec or something like that, and just so we have a checkbox, and presumably somebody then will have to go through and check that checkbox before the spec can be released. Is that kind of what you're after, or something?
Yeah, that's what I had in mind, because at this point, having 8 sections of the specification with multiple actual specifications, we could end up in a scenario where we merge a pull request that has something to do with one part of the spec, and then other parts of the spec referencing that are not updated. One instance is, for example, the core specification dictates that bundle JSON has an images section, and then both registry and security specifications point to that exact field in bundle JSON. If we end up changing that to artifacts, for example, we have to update all of them at some point. That's just one example of that happening.
Yeah, so I think the other sections have to be tied to a specific version of the core. And then if you update the other sections, you need to say that you're going to be tying them to a specific version or have that checkbox or something, I think. But once again, maybe it's something we should tackle when we get there.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say we could just, if we want to go light on process, but still kind of hint that this is what we expect, we could just change the acceptance guidelines to just say each team will nominate one person to verify that their version of the spec is compliant with others with the related specifications before voting on something, right? We could add that if that's really all we need in order to give, or if you don't want it formalized, we don't have to formalize it yet. I think that's what Chris is saying, is that
I think there'll be use cases like we don't want that people who, if you update the core spec, you shouldn't have to go and like dive through all of the other things to make sure that it works over there. And conversely, if you've worked on another piece of the spec, you maybe wouldn't expect that you have to keep it up to date with the core spec. I don't know, maybe we tackle it when we get there, but I think at least alerting people to it, that we should tie the other piece of the spec to a specific version of the core to start, just to make sure it's consistent. Yeah. And then after that, we can work out how we.
Yeah, I think the current plan is for registry and spec to target the current 1.0 of core. And then as either of them evolve, we can reassess that as needed. Okay.
Is there anything that's the outcome of this small discussion that we should bring up next week on the big meeting? Or are we okay with? Because I realize some of the suggestions we just made would impact everybody, not just this sub-team. But if we didn't really decide to recommend anything, then we don't have to.
I think the main thing we should, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think what we should do, because this is a more meta point, we should probably report back to what was discussed in this meeting as a systematic thing. Like each time we have one of these meetings, we should have like just a quick summary we can give back to the rest of the group, and maybe that can fall out of that.
This is what happens when you want your meeting to grow bigger, Radu.
I will keep that in mind for future invites.
Do not invite engineering managers to your meetings. You will just get things that you have to do.
Okay, now on to things that you were supposed to do. Have you managed to read the security spec PRs, 01, 02, and 03 sections? And do you have any?
I took an action in the last meeting to get that done. So the meeting with Matt that I just had before this. So I will make sure that I make time, or I allocate somebody who can read that. Justin Cormack is doing 12 million things at the moment, so I'm not sure it'll be him. It might be somebody else, but yeah, I'll make sure we take a look.
Shashank, is there anything specifically you'd like to walk through in those PRs that we might want to discuss?
Sorry, I'm busy taking notes too. Let me quickly, sorry about that.
I do have one quick question. Are we going to try and do the 300 one and get that merged before 301, 302, 303, and 304? Or
yeah, the problem is that sadly 300 is the one that's the least developed. I really should add some text to it, some background text, but that's the hardest one to write because I need to explain so many things. Let me get started on that. Unfortunately, I'd say right now 301, the rest are actually easier to merge, but it kind of depends on 300, right? So it doesn't make sense either.
I mean, I don't mind merging them out of order because we're just
Okay,
basically looking for a good solid working draft. We're not trying to finalize
got
everything
it,
immediately. So
got it.
whichever one you think is the closest to done, that at least
Yeah,
gives us something to say, okay, we will make sure that we've gotten this one, because it feels a little bit like we're spread a little bit thin on which thing to focus on. And I think if we can get one or two merged,
yes.
then we'll be able to get a rhythm and get things going.
Yeah, yeah. I think let's get 301 to 304. Radu, do you feel it's complete?
Yeah, I think I missed adding 304. Yeah, but yeah, 304 included. Yeah, the main
Okay.
thing we should let people know, make sure that they know is that if we merge something, it's still in drafts, right? It's not a finalized
Yes,
version of the security spec.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, so 301 to 304, please, if you gents could review and merge that.
Yeah, and I just checked. They all are correctly labeled WD for your working draft, so that I think it's safe to merge and not have people of the impression that it's a final draft.
Yep, great.
Yeah, so we'll let people give people another week or so to manage to get a read of them, and then we can bring that up either next public meeting or 2 weeks from now in this meeting.
Okay, so I'll just say Matt, Chris, and others will review in the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then in the meantime, as much progress as we can make on 300, that would also be great. Yeah, and I
Okay.
think 300 is background and introduction to Toughen in Toto, I think. And yeah, that's probably, I'm trying to, as I say, probably it's not going to be anything that formalizes the specification, the CNAB specification, but offers important context on what problems we're trying to solve. I think that's our goal, our main goal with 300, right?
Yeah. We don't have to repeat a lot of text from outside too. We can point people to there, but I think it's very important to give them a good big picture.
Yeah, here we've been going back and forth on how much we should actually introduce context versus just point people to specifications. To be honest, we know they're not going to read, and that's my main, is establishing a balance between what information we give up front and what we point to in other specs.
I agree. People are not likely to read external specs, so let's try to. Okay, sounds good. So I'll knock that out. What should we discuss next? Implementations?
I think I skipped one of the items on the agenda that I added, which was the Notary V2 work is underway, and I'll take an action item for myself for 2 weeks from now to be up to date on that discussion and to understand the state of it. I haven't participated that much into that discussion so far, so that is going to be my action item for the next 2 weeks, just to make sure that. So just to be clear, for CNAB security spec 1.0, we're targeting the current version of Notary and Tough. And right now we have a working implementation that's for Notary V1. We just want to make sure that whatever Notary V2 is doing is not very incompatible with what we're doing, right? What we discussed last week was that we want to have a 1.0 of security spec as quickly as possible, targeting the current stable versions of specs and software. And whenever Notary releases a V2, we would update the security spec and implementations to target V2. So the action item would be just to make sure that whatever V2 is doing in Notary is still suitable for our implementations and spec.
Yep, sounds good.
And then We briefly discussed last week on moving more and more things into CNAB.io, and given that we have the people who can vote on that, is there anything still blocking, or can we just start moving things? Meaning Go implementation for security spec and a very work in progress Python implementation for that.
Is our methodology to do them on a long-lived branch, or to merge them into master while things are still in working draft form?
I think we should merge them in so that they're visible, and then use tags or something else to have versions.
So right now, both the Go and Python implementations are in master, and the Go implementation is fairly advanced and it works with OCI as well, whereas the Python is just getting started. So, and I think both of the READMEs point that they're targeting a draft and it's work in progress. So not stable or 1.0 or anything like that.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Those were the items that I had on the agenda.
Oh yeah, let me just quickly add the notes and sorry guys. Yep, I think the other thing I wanted to talk about was, Radu, what should we do with implementations next? Because one thing that I'd like to do personally, at least, is to roll out the start testing Signy, for example, here at Datadog, right? So we want to see whether it meets our use cases.
Are you currently using Duffel or something based on CNAB Go? Because I think specifically for Signy, that would be the next point, starting to integrate with probably CNAB Go, if I'm...
Okay, that's a great idea.
There's nothing stopping you from using directly the Signy binaries,
right.
But I think a more consistent goal for us would be to integrate with something that's already in use, like Duffel or anything that implements any client tooling that implements CNAB. I think that's a real test that's currently in use.
Okay, we should start testing the Signy works with CNAB Go. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. We should do that. There are other use cases that I want to test, but we know that Notary V1 doesn't support them, and I don't see a choice right now. So I also want to
You're talking about delegations and things like
yeah,
that.
delegations and all that good stuff, which we won't get right now, but I don't think that'll be a deal breaker. I'll have to see what our use case is internally. I think it's doable. I just have to sit down and think about it.
Yeah, so any information on using and actual use cases from Datadog, I think those would be very helpful in us going forward with the current state of the Go implementation.
Yes. And the other thing also, we might want to learn from our lessons and contribute to Notary V2. So whatever we don't get right now, we want to make sure we get in the future.
Yeah, and that's why my plan is to get up to date with that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I tried to review the PRs, but I just didn't have the time. So, yeah, that's it for me. Is there anything else you guys would like to talk about?
I don't think I have anything.
Not on my side either.
Cool. Okay. So I guess we know what to do next. And Radu, I will catch up with you offline about specific things we have to do to start testing Signy.
Oh, sure. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Thank you.
Let us know. Let us know if you have questions. Feel free to ping us anytime about the 301 to 304.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Ciao.